And we are live. It's the Revved Up 906 podcast, a Detroit Pistons podcast to be exact. And I'm Hudson.
And I'm Ryan.
And before we get into episode number 43 of season two, I want to talk to you, the people, about a few quick things. First off, if you are new to the channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And you may have noticed that we took a hiatus for about a month. Not much going on with the Pistons community, a busy summer, a couple different factors, but it's great to be back. That's for sure. And though there hasn't been much to talk about in the Pistons community, we found a fun topic to talk about today for you guys. And we want to talk about how much hope we can have for the Detroit Pistons going forward in this coming season. And this is an interesting topic, Ryan, because it's kind of hard to know where to take it with the new additions that, the manager and front office have brought in, and to, young draft guys like Ron Holland and Bobby Klintman, to hopefully an all-star caliber Cade Cunningham. When thinking about your first thoughts on what to hope for this season, where does your mind go?
So my first immediate response to that is, okay, so we have somewhat of a blueprint per se on what this season is expected to be, what the change between last year and honestly the last couple seasons to this season. And obviously you got the new head coach, new GM, well, not GM, president of basketball operations, but he's acting as the GM anyways. So it's a glorified general manager position. The point is we got a new front office, new coaching staff, all things new there. A lot of new faces in the locker room. Obviously, Cade Cunningham and co are still present, but we draft Bobby Klintman, draft Ron Holland, bring in Tim Hardaway Jr. in a trade, Malik Beasley. The list goes on. We made a lot of I would say a big splash this offseason. In typical years past with Weaver, we wouldn't have done that. So a lot of new faces around this team this year. And to me, it's like, okay, when you look at what it had been, like last year, we were sitting there thinking, okay, this team could at least be a 25 win season.
Right.
Like it's not going to be great, but it's not going to be as bad as what it was. And it was worse. But that was also like the vet pieces that we added in last year versus what we added in this offseason. It is completely different. We upped the vet level of play. Tim Hardaway Jr., even though he wasn't having a significant role with the Mavs in the playoffs, he is still a very high-end player. Obviously, when I say high-end, I'm not talking like all-star or future Hall of Famer. I'm talking like, okay, can he have a large impact on this team going forward? And this season, I think he can. Obviously, he has a one-year deal left on his contract, so it is expiring. And it is a decent, heavy contract. So who knows what could happen there. But usually when you get guys like his caliber on a one-year deal, you can either move him at the deadline for more assets down the road, or he's actually a staple in your offense. So my hope with what happened and my expectations is I would say, even though I said it last year, we both said it, 25 wins last year. I'm saying 25 wins again this year, but I think we could go more than 25, honestly. And that's crazy considering how bad we were. But when you think of the new additions and you think of that from the aspect of, okay, how much is that going to help Cade with spacing the floor and just facilitating an offense? I think it's going to help greatly. And I think we could go at least 30 wins this upcoming season.
What's interesting, and when talking about hope for Pistons fans and commentators, I think we can have a decent amount of hope, mainly because the Eastern Conference as a whole hasn't improved dramatically across the board. You look at teams like the Washington Wizards and Atlanta Hawks with the first two picks in this year's draft. That was the biggest move they really made in the offseason, with the hopes of these draft prospects making a big impact, which we're seeming to think they won't. And then you see teams like the Philadelphia 76ers that, re-signed James Harden and kept him on his contract to hope that they can make another deep playoff run. So we can suspect that they're going to be at the top. The Boston Celtics, reasonably the same roster. The Cleveland Cavaliers, reasonably the same roster. And the teams that haven't changed a whole lot, like dramatic change ups. So I'm seeing a view of that the Eastern Conference needs a team to kind of be the next competitor for the Sixers and for the Boston Celtics. And I think the Magic are one of those teams that could easily be the next big competition in the Eastern Conference. But I think it's perfect timing for this Pistons team in the next couple of years to see the up trajectory to start playing against these big, championship style teams. And I think the Pistons, with the roster they have, can try to be competitive with some of these teams. And we're going to see, the Pistons play against the Milwaukee Bucks right away in the preseason. We're going to see how we match up against some of their better talent on that team. And one thing to hope for is consistency, because when we looked at Tobias Harris's career as a whole, when he signed with the Pistons, we did a whole episode on how he is one of the most, if not the most consistent NBA players in today's NBA. His stats haven't fallen off since his stint with the Pistons in 2018. I mean, he's just every year, it's just the same statistics. And a guy like Malik Beasley, who you mentioned before, Ryan, I think he's going to be a guy that can give consistency at the 3-point line that we haven't seen in the last couple of years. And that's what we saw right away with Bojan Bogdanovic and Alec Burks, and why they didn't cut it with the Pistons was consistency. We knew that they were going to give us 1 month out of the NBA season of great basketball, but then they would fall away. That's not what a playoff team needs. They need guys that can play consistently. So I think, and that's something that, as Pistons fans, we worry about the most, is consistency. Is, okay, they're playing really good for the month of December, for example, but then they start out middle of January and they're on a 5-game losing streak, a 10-game, whatever it might be. That, as a Pistons fan, I think we can really hope for and pray for some consistency from this roster. And I think that's something that is going to be needed for this team to have success. Ryan, I want to know some of your thoughts on this. Is it a healthy or unhealthy thing that we haven't been hearing much rumors or negativity? Because like most off seasons with the Pistons, it's like throughout the whole off season, we're like, oh, there's trade rumors with Brandon Ingram. There's talk with all these different players, and it's usually just so chaotic. But really, we saw the front office get all the things figured out right away when the season ended. Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Like, where are your thoughts on like the activity of the organization?
See, for me, when you think about this, you think about the whirlwind of an offseason we had. Coming off the season, everyone, not only in the Pistons community, but everyone in the NBA in general, were expecting some changes to happen at the coaching position. Everybody expected Monty to be gone. Everyone, for the most part, was expecting Troy Weaver to be gone. So, and then who fills those positions? That was pretty much the offseason in general for news for the Pistons. Like, who's going to fill those roles if
Right.
those two guys get fired? And we got that filled in, good to go. And then the news went to, okay, who do the Pistons draft? Are they going to draft like Matas Pazulis? Who are they going to go after? Because this draft class is supposedly very weak. So who are they going to go after? Obviously, we go with Ron Holland, and then later on we go with Bobby Clinton. But like, it was from coaching to front office to draft to, okay, are the Pistons actually going to do anything free agency wise? Are they going to make any moves? What's going to happen there? And obviously we did make some moves, but I think from that point on till now, I think it's been honestly refreshing not having to, I mean, obviously
Yeah.
for us, we want to talk Pistons.
Right.
There's a reason why we're doing this, but I will say it is refreshing to know that there's not all this speculation and rumors and just a lot of negativity towards them right now. It's more of like, okay, what are they actually going to do this year? Are they going to be as bad as they were, or are they going to be better? Like, that's the bottom line. And then also, like, I think just what JB Bickerstaff did alone and the amount of talk show interviews he's done, the introductory press conference he had. I think what his point of view is on this team going forward and how much planning he's already done, I think that gave Pistons fans a little bit of ease, because now we're not necessarily worrying about the coach. We're just focused on the future. Because when Monty came in, he had that introductory press conference, and a lot of us were sitting there going like, oh, what's going on? Like, he doesn't look like he wants to be present with the team. Doesn't look like he wants to be there. He looks like he just took the job for the money, which he most likely did. But the point is, like, everybody was focused on Monty, and now what's to come. Whereas now with JB Bickerstaff and Langdon, and then even with the moves we made, I think just the fact of there's been like no attention towards one area. I think the attention's been spread out to where I think it's actually good news that we haven't heard anything.
It almost seems like Trajan Langdon made an assertive effort to get everything out of the way right away for Summer League. And then we see Cade Cunningham make appearances with Tobias Harris and Malik Beasley at Summer League. And now hopefully they'll have all summer to kind of try to build this chemistry before they get prepped for preseason. And it seems like an effort was made from the front office. Let's get everything done right away so that we can get comfortable and get a chemistry together on all sides of, the organization, whether it's front office, coaching staff, or players. They're all trying to get this chemistry together before they hit the whirlwind that is the 82 game schedule of the NBA. Ryan, October 6th will mark the preseason start to the NBA season, and we'll get our first look at some of these Pistons players on the NBA court working together, seeing a lot of our young talent, and see what Bobby Klintman can do, Ron Holland. We're going to be playing against the Milwaukee Bucks. When walking into a preseason like this, what are some of the expectations you're having as we look and what we want to see from the team?
So obviously our preseason schedule, I'll just go out front and say what it is. We start off with Milwaukee, then we have Phoenix, back to back, and then the Warriors, and then we finish up with the Cavs. And I would say, just from an overall like team wise, I would say that's a pretty tough schedule. Granted, that's preseason, so you're not going to have a bunch of like Curry is not going to be out there for an extended amount of time. Evan Mobley and Darius Garland aren't going to be out there for an extended period of time. Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, etc. Like, all these guys aren't going to be out there for a long extent. It's going to be pretty short stints here and there, but we're at least going to get some flashes of what we can do against those guys in these preseason games. And to me, when you look at the roster, obviously we went out and we got Wendell Moore. Obviously that he's not being talked about, and I completely understand that, but I think he is someone that you could talk about this upcoming season. We went out and got Dennis Jenkins on a two-way deal following the draft. And honestly, what he did in Summer League, I was blown away with, and you were too. And he just looks like a stud. He looks like the next Jose Alvarado. So I'm excited to see what he does on a two-way contract and how JB Bickerstaff handles that situation, because you go back to last year with Bickerstaff and Cleveland, like, they have Amoni Bates, and Amoni Bates looked like a stud in the second round. And he just didn't get his feet wet a whole lot in the NBA. But granted, the Cavs weren't in like a rebuilding phase. They were in a contending phase. So I think that just changes the whole dynamic a little bit more, where we're going to see Dennis Jenkins out there. I think we're going to see him out there a lot, actually, for preseason. But then we got Ron Holland, and he should be good. Paul Reed was a very under the radar signing. I think just bringing him in alone, that's a quality player. He's very good. He's very Isaiah Stewart-esque, but they're not exact. He's a little bit more mobile, has a little bit more speed. But again, you go Malik Beasley, Bobby Klintman, and then we re-signed Simone Fontecchio, which was a good signing for us. But and then obviously Tim Hardaway Jr. But the guys we brought in, mixed with the core we already had, I think this is an exciting preseason for us, because we're going to see the chemistry unfold between Tobias and Cade, and throw Tim Hardaway Jr. in that mix. But does Jaden Ivey make that jump that we all expected him to make last year? Does he make it this year? There's a handful of guys. Does Jalen Duren make an even bigger jump than what he did this past year? Because this past year, he was amazing. Can he keep going up as years go on? And I think he can, granted, because he's still very young. But I think there's a lot of these guys on this team that can make that jump. The only player for me that I'm actually worried about preseason wise, I guess you could say there's maybe two or three. But I would say Marcus Sasser. That's my biggest worry is Sasser, just because he wasn't he controlled the offense decently well in summer league, but it wasn't like anything we expected. We expected Marcus Sasser to just go all gang ho and blow everyone out of the water, and he's a stud. But he didn't necessarily do that. It was like little flashes here and there, but it wasn't spectacular. But he was facilitating an offense, which is good because he hadn't had done that this past year. But then I would say another worry for me is Isaiah Stewart, because obviously the last couple of years he's never played a full season in his NBA career. He has an injury bug every single season, and then on top of the injury bug, last year you had the altercation with Drew Eubanks. And so like, does that continue to happen as time goes on? Because if we lose, obviously losing hurts players and their mindset going forward. So obviously that hurts Stu a little bit with the losing, to the point where he's getting in an altercation with Drew Eubanks. So my concern with him is, can he stay healthy? And then with the amount of playing time he gets, can he have a large effect? Because like I said, Paul Reed is very Isaiah Stewart-esque. Can Paul Reed replace Stu, or is Stu going to win that battle? It's kind of going back to Stu, Wiseman, and Bagley in that position battle that we had going forward last year. But then my third worry is Asar Thompson, just because obviously he had, I would say, a decent rookie season, but then he had the blood clots there at the very end, and that held him out through all the rest of the season, 20 games, and then it held him out through summer league, and then he finally is just getting back into the groove of things. And to me, when you go from his level of play, overtime elite, to the NBA, that's a massive difference in play style, and just the competitive nature, the different types of players you're going to see in overtime elite versus the NBA. There's a big jump. So can Asar Thompson, without summer league this past year, and the last 20 games of the season where he really would have been given more of an opportunity to play, can he improve from what he did last year? Those are my three guys that I'm a little worried about. Otherwise, everybody else, for the most part, I'm excited for, and I think a lot of them could be very good for us.
Yeah, and I think what's important for those three players is stay in your lane. Don't try to force things. I know we saw at times Asar Thompson try to force the three ball, or force, the tempo up the court and rush the offense at times. And Isaiah Stewart, force certain underneath the basket types of shots, and Marcus Sasser definitely forced the 3-point shooter. 3-point shot rather. I want to see these guys just kind of fall into their own role and not force themselves to be this type of player they see them being. And I think that if they find their role and stick with that, they're going to find their identity and their role on the basketball court through that. And yeah, I mean, and then obviously health is a big thing for all of them. As far as what I want to see from the team when preseason starts, I think what's going to be important is to see guys separate themselves from the pros and the G League. I want to see what if Dennis Jenkins belongs on the team, and decides to no longer be a two-way player and take that step. I want to see if Marcus Sasser is a G League point guard or a Detroit Pistons point guard. I want to see, these types, or Bobby Klintman, if he's going to be a guy that just sits the bench the rest of the season or sets himself apart. I want to see this right out the get-go, because we have a lot of new talent on this Pistons team, and it's going to be a difficult time for JB Bickerstaff and Trajan Langdon to figure out what this 12-man roster looks like. And from what we've seen in the film, in the games, is there's a lot of guys that are tweeners, that are guys that are either going to be really good in the G League and putting up big numbers like a Luka Garza, or a guy that's going to be a great role player for this Detroit Pistons team. And we need to figure out who's where. And it's going to be kind of interesting because some guys can exceed our expectation, or some guys, can kind of fall short of what we're hoping them to be. Because last season, if we remember what we were talking about right before the season started, I was talking about Marcus Sasser being a world beater, being somebody that's going to exceed my expectations and be an absolute dog in the NBA. And I just didn't see that from him. Last season, we saw shines of that, but we really need to see him either separate himself or move on. He's in his third season. And Isaiah Stewart's kind of one of those guys. Once you reach your third season in the NBA and you haven't found your specific role on a team, you're going to see yourself possibly in a trade. Not saying that Isaiah Stewart isn't the rabble rouser, isn't the tough guy for this Pistons team, but every team needs that. So that's going to be he's a player that's going to be in a lot of trade talk, I think, this season. And we need to see if he's going to separate himself as a perennial starter or a bench guy. So that's going to be something we want to keep a close eye on, who's separating themselves from NBA role players to G League stars. As a specific player and talking about what we want to see improvement wise from specific players, I want to talk about Jalen Duren. Jalen Duren's going to be a guy that we're going to want to watch closely this season, because when Andre Drummond, and I always kind of compare Andre and Jalen, I always compare them a lot because very similar play style, and we kind of want Duren to be exactly what Andre was. And when Andre was coming into his third season, he in that third season turned into a double-double monster. And we're going to want to see that from Jalen Duren. And he's like that in spurts, but we want to see that consistently. We want to see him getting 12 to 15 points a game, hitting that 10 rebound mark. Because if he doesn't do that, we're going to start worrying about his situation. We need to see some consistency out of him, and he's still young, so that gives him a little grace. But he's starting to, he's growing and aging. We have to see some improvements. But Ryan, what's a specific player that you're like, okay, if he took a next step in this category or this statistic, he's going to be a baller? Who comes to mind there?
To me, it has to be Jaden Ivey. Just because, like, his rookie year, we're sitting there going like, okay, he can be a point guard too. He's not just a guard. He can be a point. And then last year, he took a big jump defensively, and that was amazing. But his offense just was on a decline a little bit more. And granted, you had a little bit of everything going on last year between the losing, Monty Williams not necessarily liking him a whole lot. And then not to mention, like, we had Bojan Bogdanovic to start the year off. And Bojan is a ball hog. He really is. He doesn't like giving up shots. He likes the ball in his hands at all times. So from that to, okay, how is this dynamic going to work with Cade now? Now that Cade is having a full year back into the groove of things. Because we never saw Jaden Ivey and Cade really together when Ivey played in his rookie year, because you had Cade going out with that injury, like, what, 10 games in, and that was it. And then he was out the whole year. So they never really worked as a cohesive unit at that point yet. So last year was the first group of things. Obviously, new head coach, all this and that, Bojan Bogdanovic. It was a disaster. But this year, I want the defense to still be there. It should not go away. The offense, I think he needs to take another jump into that. He can't just hover, to me at least for him, he can't just hover around 15 points a game and that's about it. He has to be at least at that 20-point mark, because we all know what he can be and what he can do. Because his rookie year, he was going 20 points consistently on a regular basis here, night in, night out. And then last year, it just disappeared. It fell off a cliff. His defense got drastically better, but his offense wasn't there. So if he can bring the offense that he had going his rookie year and his defense from last year into this third year for him, I think he takes that massive jump. Because you had Donovan Mitchell, you had Russell Westbrook, and you had a couple others last year giving props to Ivy post-game. And they don't just go out there and do that. So if he can put together between offensively and defensively his first 2 years and bring that into this year with JB Bickerstaff, because JB Bickerstaff loves guards because he helped develop Darius Garland, helped develop Donovan Mitchell, even more than I know Donovan Mitchell was developed, but he turned Donovan Mitchell into a different type of player than what he was in Utah. He's a completely different player in Cleveland than he was with the Jazz. And it's evident. Just the play style and the whole team dynamic alone, it's not necessarily the team is on his back. He can do that at times, but it's not always like that. It's more if he's a team player now more so than ever. Not to say he was never a team player, because he is a team player. But JB Bickerstaff loves guards. And I think he can get probably the most we will ever see out of Jaden Ivey this year. And so if he can bring the first 2 seasons together and just joint that this year, and more cohesiveness with Cade, and then more with Jalen Duren, and then throw in Tobias Harris in the gang, like I think he could make that next jump. But that's the one player that I want my eyes on between, and I would agree with Duren for you too. I would say those 2 guys are the guys that we should be paying attention to the most.
Well, and to your point about, Jaden Ivey kind of having a down year last year, it was evident from the get-go, and Monty always denied it, but Monty just never seemed to click with Jaden Ivey, weirdly enough. And it's weird because you'd think Monty Williams is an effort guy, and Jaden, for the most part, is an effort guy. So I think if I'm Jaden Ivey coming into this season, I am ecstatic about having JB Bickerstaff and what he did with Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, and that relationship he had. They had such close relationships with his time in Cleveland. I'm hoping that Jaden Ivey is looking at this as a big, bright, shining opportunity for him to have the offense focus on him and Cade at the forefront, and finding schemes to get Jaden Ivey the ball at all 3 levels offensively. So I also agree with that, very much so, because I think Jaden should be very excited about having a point guard mindset coach. I think that's going to be great for him. Speaking about Cade Cunningham, he's been very quiet this offseason. We haven't seen much about him. No podcast really from what I've seen, but a few things have come up about him in the last couple of days that I kind of wanted to talk about. Just the other day, I saw a clip of Cade Cunningham coaching up high school players, especially a center, weirdly enough. But what I like in seeing that, Ryan, is a leadership quality that we've questioned in the past. Just because he's not a real vocal guy from what we see in the media. On the court, sometimes we see him get riled up, but usually when he gets upset, he kind of gets quiet. So I really like see Cade kind of mentoring these high school players, working on that leadership and that vocal and teaching players. I think that's very cool to see from him, especially as a Pistons fan, because we haven't seen a player step up as a leader for this team yet. And I think Tobias is going to be one of those guys that really just takes the reins right away, and hopefully Cade learns something from that. But I think we can really hope to see in this upcoming season a vocal leader in Cade Cunningham that we've been hoping for the last couple of years. And Ryan, the next thing I wanted to talk about is I saw an article from Bleacher Report talking about the next series of all-stars, the next guys up that could possibly be all-stars this season. And I'm going to give you the top 10 players Bleacher Report listed off, players to make their first all-star appearance. So they got number 1, Victor Wembanyama. That's, easy, we kind of saw that coming. They got Jalen Williams at 2. And then they got Chet Holmgren at 3. They got Alperen Sengun at 4, and Cade Cunningham at 5. Jamal Murray surprisingly hasn't made his first All-Star appearance. He's at 6. Evan Mobley at 7. Desmond Bain at 8. Franz Wagner at 9. Jonathan Kuminga at 10, which is surprising to me. I didn't really know that Jonathan Kuminga was on the radar. But Ryan, what are some of your thoughts at 5? One of the biggest ones that stands out to me is Jalen Williams. I like Jalen Williams. Don't get me wrong. I like his little brother too, Cody Williams. But I do not think he should be above Cade Cunningham as far as sniffing out his first All-Star appearance this winter.
To me, I think it's fair to have Cade at 5 and Williams ahead of him at 2. And that's solely because of, okay, Cade had a great rookie year, then was out, then came back and had a good, decent year. I mean, he had a good start, but he had a great finish. But now the question is, between pretty much 2 years in the league, this is, I would say it's his third year. I mean, he only played 10 games his second year. It's his third year pretty much in the league. So this is like more of a prove it year for him. But on top of that, I think it's not necessarily, okay, we're not doubting Cade Cunningham as a player. We're doubting the Pistons as a team. I think that's why he's that low on that list, just because the Pistons are coming off the worst record in franchise history, one of the worst records in NBA history. So just the team aspect alone, because a lot of players do not make the All-Star game if they're not on a winning team. That's the bottom line. You have to be on a winning team. There's a lot of criteria there. It's always been like that. It's always going to be like that. Although, I mean, there's been years where like Austin Reeves is on the bid. I'm sitting there going like, how is he on the bid? Like I'm sorry, he's a decent player. I'm not doubting that. But out of anyone you could probably go off of, you're saying Austin Reeves that just should be on that list. He should not. It's not a popularity contest. It should be based off of, what are these guys doing to impact their team? What are these guys doing to not just impact their team, but are they doing something that's beneficial towards the team? Are they doing something that hurts these opposing teams coming in? Like, there has to be some criteria there. It just can't be like, oh, Austin Reeves, he's awesome because he plays with LeBron. Like, that just can't be it. But that was enough for my tangent on Austin Reeves. The point is, like, Cade Cunningham hasn't, he has proven himself, but he has yet to prove himself too. And just the question of what the Pistons will look like this year is a big reason as to me, as to why he would be so low on the list. But I will say, Jamal Murray not being an All-Star yet is just surprising to me. Because like, he's that good. He's like, you go back to the playoffs this past year. Granted, they didn't win anything, but he was amazing in all those playoff series. Like, he was the reason why they were in the game majority of the time. And that's saying something when you have Nikola Jokic, who's I would say the best center in the NBA right now, on your team. And yet Jamal Murray is hitting those game-winning shots. Like, he hit that game winner over Anthony Davis, and Davis could not do anything else. Like, he had the hand up in his face and everything. But yeah, so surprising to me that Jamal Murray has not been an All-Star yet. I think out of anybody on that list, I would put him at number 1 as most likely, just because if he plays anything like he did in the postseason this past year and applies that this year, I think he gets that bid. But yeah, Cade Cunningham at 5, it's understandable just because of the Pistons as a whole. And it is a prove it year because, again, he didn't really play his second year in the league, play the first 10 games, and that was it. So this is a prove it year for him, and it's a prove it year for the Pistons. So I can understand why he's at 5.
That will do it for episode number 43 of season 2. We talked about how much we can hope for from a fan aspect of the Detroit Pistons. Make sure to like and subscribe and tune in every Wednesday. We will see you guys soon. Peace.